All right, great. Well, I will dive right in. I am Roberta Hudy with iPlan Group, and we're located in Westlake, Ohio, just up in Northeast Ohio. I've got buttons going all over the place here, but we are a self-directed IRA administrator with a custodial responsibility for our clients that are using their IRAs to invest in alternative investments. And of course, that includes real estate. We are, of course, passive. Those of you that may not be familiar with self-directed IRAs, we're going to kind of get you up to speed with some basics. And also I'm going to dive into a conversation really about taxes. So this is very important information for you as an investor, especially if you're in alternatives like with Jack and DK, doing real estate, private lending, or if you're doing some other alternatives. This is a great educational piece for you to be sure that you're using a self-directed IRA where you can with the investment that you're most comfortable with. So when I say we're passive, let me just kind of cover that in detail, meaning we are not here for the legal investment advice and certainly do not endorse any investment. It is very important that you understand with a self-directed IRA, it's just that it's self-directed. Very important that you do your due diligence in any investment that you're considering. You want to go to all the way to all the third parties that are involved in any investment. Make sure that you retain your tax, legal investment advisors, because with a self-directed IRA, our role is to review those investments for compliance, feasibility. We're regulated by the Department of Labor and the IRS. So when we review, it's not for performance. Of course, there's no guarantees. There's always risk. I'm sure Jack and DK cover that quite a bit. Risk within any investment that you make, but with a self-directed IRA, you want to make sure that you're comfortable and that you understand exactly what you're investing in and how those rules apply when you use a self-directed IRA. So that's our role. We're going to talk a little bit more about iPlan Group, really kind of what makes us different. If you are currently a self-directed IRA investor and you're not a client of iPlan Group, we want to explain just some differences about us. Also, tax-free income. It is a big hot topic this year for a lot of reasons. Those of you, you can even put it in the chat. It's very helpful for me. If you have a Roth, just put in the word Roth. Let me know if you are a Roth IRA holder. If you're not, if you are interested in doing a traditional IRA, I should say converting funds from traditional to Roth, if you're familiar with that or not, we're going to cover that as well, because Roth IRAs get you in that tax-free zone in retirement. So we'll talk about that. And of course, funding a self-directed IRA is probably one of the most important pieces, because funding that IRA will get you in a position where you can actually make offers into investments that you are considering. We do work very closely with some of Jack's clients and DK's clients when they want some education and they're like, I've heard of this, but I'm not really sure how to do it. That's what we really specialize in, is this education. So we can help you get started and have a good understanding of what you're actually doing with the self-directed IRA. We want to empower you to be successful. And of course, that's knowing what you're doing, right? Education. You can't exercise things that you don't know. So we're very passionate about that. So it's great to be on this platform tonight. We also have a lot of educational events at iplangroup.com. Check out our events page and join us anytime. We cover a lot of different topics. So we like to keep current as much as we can. And of course, keeping that passive role in mind, we do bring in a lot of experts and people that can give advice that we otherwise cannot. So what makes us different? Big thing here is that we are a company built by investors for investors. So our founder and CEO, I'm going to touch on a little bit of her background. She founded iPlan Group, and Jack knows her, of course, personally. She's a very accomplished investor. And with that mindset here at iPlan Group, we are able to give you a more personal client experience, because certainly we understand the urgency of investments. We understand getting funds to the table, the ability to call our organization and actually have somebody answer the phone. That's a big deal, especially these days with companies and a lot of the remote working that everybody's doing. We like to keep that, of course, personal. So very simplified fee structure. I'm not going to go into fees tonight, but one-on-one you can reach out. We'll talk about that. Jack, I think, is pretty familiar with those too at this point, but they are simplified, no transaction fees. That's a big deal. So if you're dealing with trying to figure out what your fees are every year because of transactions, you definitely want to reach out to us and learn about our fee schedule. This is our founder, Jill, and this is the reason that we are who we are. She founded iPlan Group 9 years ago. We've been growing consistently every year. And out of her frustration, basically as a self-directed IRA investor herself, she was a client of a much larger firm, and she was frustrated. She had to file extensions, couldn't get funds to the table. She's done everything from mobile home parks, land, auction environments, tax liens, deeds, multifamily, you name it, she's done it. And out of that frustration and her passion for starting businesses, she said, I think I can do it better. And she most definitely has done it better. So that's who we are. That's the background. And I hope that you get to talk with us one-on-one and get to know us a little bit better. As I mentioned earlier, we are really talking about tax advantage I should say tax advantage choices, or when are you going to pay those taxes? Are you going to pay it on the seed when you have a little bit of money, or are you going to pay it on the growth when you have a lot of money? Especially as a real estate investor, or maybe you're in the stock market, whatever investments you're doing, you understand the power of tax advantages using IRAs or other things to grow tax deferred, grow those investments tax deferred or tax free. But even if tax rates were going to stay exactly the same, which of course we know they do not, if you are paying taxes on, let's say, $100,000 and your net effective tax rate is 25%, that's a lot less than 25% of, let's say, $1 million. So that's what you want to be thinking about. When do you want to pay those taxes, seed or growth? I did take a little quick peek at our chat here. We do have a client on the line, so thank you, Richard, for telling us that. Self-directed, and also another person that is chimed in with a Roth traditional 401k and also a pension. So it sounds like they have some existing IRAs, and we're going to talk about how you can actually move a portion of those IRAs if they're not truly self-directed, and I'll define that shortly. So tax advantages. The other thing I want to comment before I move forward is just about that required minimum distribution. So those of you that have that traditional IRA, pension, 401k, at 59 and a half, that's the age you're eligible to take that money out without penalty. It's going to be added to your net ordinary income in the year that you take that distribution. So that net effective tax rate in that year, that's where you're going to be paying that tax on that growth. In the Roth IRA, it's not added back to your net ordinary income. So it's truly tax-free growth at that point. So just wanted to make sure that I mentioned that. If I could explain the power of a self-directed IRA, a Roth IRA, this is the slide that I would want you to look at and absorb, because this is really it. Now, let's say you got a late start at 40 and you started or you were able to put $100,000 into a Roth IRA, just for purposes of example, and you are not making any contributions, and you've got a return of 10% in this account. That's reasonable. Now, your fees are not included in the structure, by the way. We're just saying 10% net. But you do this for 25 years. You've got this growing for you, no contributions. You just have it invested with 10% return. But let's say you're able to take out that net effective tax rate of 25%. So taking out taxation, that's what we call the power of zero. Over that time, in 25 years, just because you put it in the Roth IRA, you have a taxable savings of over $600,000. Now, you want to ask yourself, would that make a big difference for me at the age of retirement? I think most of you would definitely be saying yes. So a Roth IRA is extremely, extremely powerful. Self-directed. So when I'm talking about this, let's clarify it. And Jack, we talk a lot about this with the investment paperwork, right? So people are talking with you about making an investment. They say, yep, I definitely have heard about self-directed IRAs. I want the tax advantage. How do I title this offer? The most important thing is that you have the account opened and funded. We don't have any minimums over here, so you can fund it with a contribution or a portion of an account. But in that position, you've got a self-directed IRA account number. Now you can get it titled in the IRA as opposed to being titled in your name. Very important. Once you acquire the asset outside of the IRA, we can't back it into the IRA. So that's crucial. Self-directed in this conversation is all about titling. So we're titling the asset specifically in the IRA. We've got 40% of our clients that are doing real estate. So that could be real estate with Jack and DK, it could be a physical property buy and hold. You could be a landlord, wholesale, all kinds of different options, but it's titled in the IRA. And we've got a good portion of our clients that are doing the lending, right? So promissory note, maybe it's mortgage backed. Jack knows a lot about that stuff too. So you can do that as well. And we have a lot of clients that are doing startup companies or entities, including syndications, private placements. So lots of different options. That's what we're talking about in this conversation, self-directed, not having your account at Wells Fargo with some real estate in it, right? In the stock market. That's not what we're talking about. Now, in terms of the contribution limits and the distribution rules, they're exactly the same as an IRA that you hold right now. All the tax benefits and all of those rules or limitations. So self-directed just means that you move that account over to a company like iPlan Group that allows you to self-direct and invest into alternatives. It's a unique custodial responsibility. So I want to mention that because a lot of people talk to their advisors and their advisors are like, what are you talking about? You know, you've got real estate in your bucket, bucket A that we've got over here with your medium risk. We're not talking about that. And they say, well, you can't do real estate. It's not that you can't, it's just they don't do it. And so that's why, honestly, a lot of financial advisors are really getting much better and in this conversation and savvy with it. And if they understand it, definitely we are open to talking with that advisor as well, because you don't always want to take an entire account or your whole portfolio and throw it into a piece of real estate, right? But you're confident with a portion of that money to put into real estate. So you could move a portion of that account and definitely take advantage of a self-directed IRA. So titling, it's on the screen. We have this information also on our website. Happy to share any of this with you one-on-one, but that's what it looks like. You got to get that titling right and make sure that it's in the name of the IRA. So why the self-directed IRA? I know I've touched on quite a bit of that already because I tend to talk a lot about different topics, sometimes quickly, but I want to be sure to point out that this flexibility that we're talking about, I think that's really where we hear our clients and prospects as well, just saying, I need more flexibility. I need better return. I need some yield that makes sense, that I'm not just kind of teetering on the stock market, which is, I know it's been fantastic, but cyclically, we know, what goes up comes down. So that diversification can be very reassuring to you, especially if you're, again, comfortable with alternatives. Our clients want to invest in what they know and understand. A lot of people move into real estate because they love it or they've learned about it. Some people have never done it, but they get educated and they say, you know what, that makes sense. Makes more sense than leaving all my money in the stock market, for example. So investing in what you know, cryptocurrency, that's been a new one too, and people are getting very comfortable there. Yes, you can do it with an IRA. Tax deferred or tax-free growth. And I also want to point out unlimited growth inside of an IRA. Right now, there's been no tax changes yet. So there's unlimited growth in an IRA, meaning, yes, multiple assets in the IRA. You can deploy the funds over and over and over and keep that money working for you. So that is critical. If you do stocks and bonds as well, or ETFs, like you're picking your own, let's say on TD Ameritrade or other, you can do that here at iPlan Group too, uninvested cash. We can talk about that one-on-one, but we do have a pretty seamless platform there with TD Ameritrade. So 7 different accounts. It's not just your traditional or Roth. Health savings accounts, Coverdell education savings accounts. Those are known as specialty accounts. Very powerful. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail there. I will tell you the health savings account is growing in popularity. If you do have a high deductible healthcare plan, you are eligible to open one of these accounts and get that account working for you in a self-directed IRA investment. Tax deferred on that contribution. So you've got a deduction going in. And then when you pay for a qualified medical expense on the way out, that's a tax-free withdrawal. So you're getting kind of that Roth traditional in one account. If you are a small business owner and you qualify for a solo 401k, super powerful. So instead of a $6,000 or $7,000 annual contribution on a Roth or traditional based on your age, you can potentially get up to 53,000 or 64,500, big difference. SEP, or the Simplified Employee Pension Plan, can also be transferred to fund an IRA, as well as a simple, or you can keep it in kind if that's the account that you have now. Very, very powerful. 3 ways to fund: contribution, that I touched on already. So if you are age 50 and over, you get that catch-up contribution of $1,000 a year. I always chuckle a little bit on that, but you know, it's a difference. You're able to contribute. You can, and again, that's the Roth or traditional IRA. You can transfer from an existing account, from an existing IRA. So for example, Roth to Roth or traditional to traditional. That's what we call an in-kind transfer. That is a non-taxable event. So a portion of that existing account or an entire account, you just want to be thinking about the capital resources that you need for the investment, as well as any expenses related to the investment, because the titling upfront, if it's 100% outright titled in your IRA, that asset, any expenses related to it have to come out of that IRA, as well as any returns have to go back to the IRA. So flowing in and out by the percentage of ownership. So very important. So you just need to be thinking about how much capital do I need. Rollover of an employer-sponsored plan is also eligible. We saw, of course, a big uptick on this as well, because a lot of people had job transitions last year and even into this year. And often I talk to people that have multiple 401ks. I always congratulate them because they really worked those employer plans well. I know Jack's familiar with this as well. If you have a TSP, pension, or other, 403B, teacher, whatever it is, you can roll that plan over if it's a former employer plan. So that potentially could be a much higher balance for you. You can use a combination of these 3 ways to fund as well. So it doesn't have to be one. It can be a combination of all. So you want to make sure you're talking with your tax advisors as well, and making sure you're not exceeding contribution limits, because there are limits on those plans each year, but you can definitely use a combination of these to fund a self-directed IRA. If you are still working, still employed, and you've got one of these employer-sponsored plans, they're considered a traditional category, by the way. Some of them do have Roth components, so you can ask about that with your employer. But if you are still working and you are considering moving some of those funds, you got to find out from the employer, the custodian for that employer plan, and find out if there's what's called an in-service rollover. In some cases, we see that age 50 or over, we'll see it, or if you're into your 60s and still employed, there may be a provision for you to do an in-service rollover or an in-service distribution. So find out about that. Distributions, of course, being different than rollover. So we're doing pretty good so far, right? Are we good on time, Jack?
Sure.
Good. Okay, great.
Yes,
all right. We have a hello from that's a hard name to pronounce, Jack. You have to look at that. I wonder if this is one of your clients, but I believe it is Barzane. So welcome. Thank you. Thanks for saying hello. So tax advantage choices. I'm going to show this screen 2 more times because I want you to really get this in your brain about this net effective tax rate at retirement. It's a big deal. So what I mean is, when IRAs were established, they came about actually back in 1974 out of ERISA. It was legislation that basically provided you and I a way to save for retirement. And back in 74, the theory is when you retire, you're going to be making less money, therefore a lower net effective tax rate, right? So you've got these traditional IRAs working for you. Well, 1997, the Roth came about. And that is, again, the one that you can get the tax-free distribution at retirement. But with these traditional IRAs, you've got that required minimum distribution at age 72. And again, the net effective tax rate, the theory is, it's going to be lower at retirement. Well, investors know that they're growing their IRAs exponentially, and their tax rate at retirement potentially could double, and believe it or not, exceed like 50%. I'm not an advisor, but I'm doing this kind of talk here for you just to let you know that you need to find out what that is. Is it 10%? Is it 25%? There's a great book called The Power of Zero. It's written by David McKnight. If you do Google that, look for the 2018 revised edition. There's a lot of great tools out there, but he does a nice job talking about what this net effective tax rate is, because you may have Social Security, you may have interest income, you have all these different things coming in. And if you've got millions of dollars, for example, in a traditional IRA, you're going to be pulling that out, and those tax rates, what are they going to be? So I want you to be thinking about that. And are you eligible to get into a Roth possibly? So Secure Act, you've probably heard of this. In 2019 and 2020, we had the CARES Act, of course, out of the pandemic. There were some provisions in there for IRA holders to access their funds without penalty. A lot of these provisions are expiring, including the forbearance that people are experiencing, for basically forbearance from the CARES Act saying, you know, we're going to modify the loans after the forbearance is over. Well, that is expiring. So you want to make sure that you're familiar with some of these concepts, especially as an advisor, as an investor, because there's some more opportunities coming up for you. But also within this Secure Act 2.0, we've got some tax legislation in there proposed. There may be some RMDs on Roth. There may be an elimination of Roth conversions. This is big news. We don't know yet, but you want to make sure that you're strategizing with your team and finding out how this is going to affect you. For those of you that have heard about Peter Thiel, the co-founder of PayPal, he was recently in the news. Yeah, he's got $5 billion in his Roth IRA. Yes, it's with a B. And a lot of people shake their head. And I always say, guess what? You know, it's not just for the Peter Thiels, it's for you and me. It's for everyone. This Roth IRA is powerful, and Peter Thiel is not, he's actually been audited over and over and over, and they've never been able to penalize him because he has followed the rules. He is just an extraordinary tech, right? Investor. And so he didn't do that just with PayPal, by the way, but with Facebook and some other things that he was very comfortable with. Of course, with these kinds of things coming into the news, you know, the legislation, the tax legislation is definitely taking a second look at some of these tax advantages of IRAs. So make sure that you do some research, talk with your tax advisor, and find out how it's going to affect you. Here's what we're seeing with our clients and also prospects that we speak with. Roth conversions are definitely increasing for reasons I've already explained. Many people are using multiple IRAs. So maybe in our Q&A, we can touch on this too, Jack. I know Jack is expecting his fourth child, and there's some tools. I mentioned that Coverdell Education Savings Account. If you establish one of those for your child, all they need is a Social Security number. You can contribute $2,000. It's not tax deferred. But the reason I bring it up is you could title a percentage of your investment with Jack, possibly, in your child's Coverdell Education Savings Account. And those returns, whatever that percentage is, can return back to that account. You can make the contributions until their child is age 18 and possibly grow or get that child to be a real estate investor by using that account. So very powerful. We can talk about that one-on-one. So multiple IRAs, health savings accounts, small business plans. Solo 401ks, hot topic. We had a conversation with that on a webinar last week, and we're going to be doing another one on September 2nd. They're definitely more flexible accounts, higher contributions. If you are looking to do other types of assets, you're looking to strategize on taxation. Those of you that know about unrelated business income tax or UDFI, other things like that, solo 401ks, if you qualify, can be a better tool to help you mitigate some of those taxes. So I just want to touch on that. I like to touch on some pitfalls too. I know Jack and I talk about this here and there as well. Those of you that are investing with or without a self-directed IRA, a lot of times what we see is kind of this lack of due diligence, and people are just not sure, you know, what it looks like, or they follow people and they say, well, you know, my friends are investing in this and that's great and they're feeling comfortable, but are you comfortable? And have you really done your due diligence on those investments? It's super important to do that. Understand your risk. Also with syndications, multifamily funds, things that, you know, I know Jack and DK are doing, I always say, well, how is your investment secured? You know, those are the questions that you want to be asking. Very important. We also see people frustrated by not getting good service from their provider. They sometimes miss opportunities, and I will tell you, our account process is pretty fast. So you get a signed application into iPlan Group and we're pretty quick. We do quote 24 to 48 hours. A lot of times it is same day. Now, we're sometimes at the mercy of the other custodian when you're doing that rollover or the transfer. We sometimes see, you know, 7 to 10 days typical, and then we'll see maybe 3 weeks sometimes in those rollover situations. Do we make mistakes? Yep, it happens. And we are very quick to correct and of course own those mistakes. But we just want you to know that that poor service sometimes is not a mistake. It's just really not part of their, I want to say, culture or their mindset. You just get caught in bottlenecks. And we are a boutique firm and we are a little bit smaller. We do have good processes, but that service can make or break your situation. And I've already talked about not knowing that tax rate at retirement. Those are definitely questions for you with your advisor. There's a lot of great products out there to help you save for retirement, but make sure that you're doing some projections or at least some estimates on where you think you're going to be at 59 and a half or at age 72. Still good on time. I know I'm covering quite a bit. We're at about 6:27. So I just want to dive into the Roth IRA just a little bit more, take about maybe 4 to 5 more minutes. Qualifying for a Roth IRA, you must have earned income, W-2 or 1099. This is defined by the IRS. So you've got to have income to open the Roth IRA. Very important. There is a 5-year seasoning rule also on a Roth IRA. And what this means is from the time that you open and fund in that tax year that you open and fund a Roth IRA, you must have that account seasoned for 5 years. And then after that 5 years, you're able to draw on the contribution of the Roth IRA without penalty. So that's important. Now, that's after age 59 and a half, no 10% penalty. You can grow, draw on that growth as well without having a penalty, but you've got to have it open and funded for 5 years. So if you open a Roth IRA at age 55, you would still have to wait those 5 years, not the 59 and a half, to draw on the growth. You can always draw on the contribution without penalty. That's a different feature of a Roth IRA than a traditional IRA. Now, it is an after-tax contribution on the Roth IRA, but a tax-free withdrawal. So that's also critical. So you're not going to get that deduction. It's after-tax dollars. That's why you don't have to pay that tax on the way out. And then I've already mentioned the zero tax and the 10% penalty, but the spousal contribution, a lot of people don't know this either. So if you are working and your spouse is not working, you both can establish a Roth IRA and contribute and max out those contributions. So $12,000 annually, so $6,000 one individual, $6,000 the other, or $7,000, $7,000. So doubling that household contribution. So those of you that are familiar with modified adjusted gross income limits, the government likes to, of course, put some limitations on this powerful tool. If you make too much money, you cannot open and fund a Roth IRA. So what does that mean? So if you're single, filing single, making under $140,000, you're good to go. But if you're over, you cannot open and fund that Roth IRA. If you're married, filing jointly, that's $208,000. But everybody can have a Roth IRA. And this is as of 2021. We just do not know yet what's going to happen in 2022, but you can definitely have a Roth IRA this year. And you can do that through the conversion. So again, tax advantage choices. This is a tax question. If you're going to convert a portion of your traditional IRA, I want you to think about amount right now. Maybe you've got $100,000 in an account, you've got $1 million, 200,000, whatever that is, 50,000, and you convert a portion of that account, that is going to be added to your net ordinary income. So you're going to pay that tax now, but you want to be thinking about what is that growth, right, in that investment and on the way out. And I see a comment here, so I'm going to address that in just one moment. The Roth conversion looks like this. You have a traditional IRA, for example, $100,000, and you want to convert $50,000 into a Roth IRA. That $50,000 is going to be added to your net ordinary income. So you make, for example, $100,000 earned income in 2021. You convert that you convert that traditional amount into a Roth IRA, 50,000. Now your net ordinary income, or that net effective tax rate, is going to be based on $150,000. So yes, you're paying the tax now. Can that be paid out of your IRA funds? It can. Again, tax questions. That may not be a smart move for you, but I just want you to know there's options to do that. But you would be paying that tax now. Very important that you walk through that with your tax advisor. Let me just take a look here. So what about head of household? Head of household. Help me out a little bit more on that, James. Do you mean head of household on the Roth IRA or in that spousal contribution? I'm not really sure. If you can give me a little more information on that, that would be great. So why would you want to do this now? Well, it is about this proposed tax legislation. There's a lot of movement going on. We've seen taxes increase in the past. I'm not going to get into all these things, and I'm sure Jack and DK can, but the capital gains tax rate, I mean, it's looking interesting there. There's definitely a lot of reasons to use a self-directed IRA and consider a Roth right now. We do individual IRA strategy sessions with you. So if you're working with Jack and you want to walk through some of these different scenarios, just reach out to us. Jack will also refer you over to me. We can set up a call. If you have inherited IRAs, that's something to look at as well. A lot of times those cannot be converted to Roth. Sometimes you may have a Roth IRA inherited, but you want to be thinking about all the different options going on. Great year to update beneficiaries on all of your accounts. That's also critical because an IRA in and of itself, it's a trust and it does have some asset protection. So if you were to pass, your assets inside of that IRA are going to be passed to that beneficiary outside of probate. So that's a big deal. So be looking at those qualified funds. There's some mega Roth strategies out there that's specifically in a solo 401k. We can talk about that one-on-one, but these are some of the things that we're seeing now that people are, getting that money into these IRAs this year so they can mitigate what might be coming down the path next year. So let me see if we've got more. Head of household income limitation. How much can a head of household earn for a Roth? So it's actually based on how you file, but that again is a good question for your advisor, James, but it is based on how you file. So it's combined. We also have this on our website under forms in our info kit. I can also email that to you. It's right on the form. I don't have one in front of me, but it does list those income limits, but it is a household income. So head of household, it's not really based on that. It's how you're filing. That's how I understand it. I hope that helps. Okay, so I think I have covered the things that I think to be most significant. Maybe you have some other things that have come to mind, and I welcome those questions.
Thank you very much. I just want to say we worked with quite a few self-directed IRA companies, and we have had hands down the best service with iPlan Group. We've had a number of companies that are much larger, and just processing and pushing paperwork, getting approval, just is a very extreme amount of time. We've had deals that have almost haven't closed because we didn't get funds in with other companies. It's just been pulling teeth. So it's really been very desirable working with iPlan Group. And one other thing I wanted to mention too is with the idea, I've got a number of my friends that have Roth IRAs set up for their kids when they're like 3 years old. And if you go back in those slides, in order to be able to have a Roth IRA, you have to have either 1099 or W-2 income. So what some of my friends have done is they will actually pay their kids a 1099 as modeling, or more times, take some pictures, put them on a brochure. Maybe the brochure just makes it the garbage can, but regardless, it's used for that purpose to be able to provide income to your children and then get them started off in a Roth IRA at a very, very young age. So it was just kind of a cool thing that some of our friends have been able to do.
Yes, and that's why you are you, because you can talk about all these creative strategies, but that's 100% earned income, as defined by the IRS. Yep. You can get real creative, especially in real estate. There's a lot of families, like Jack is saying, and I know he's thinking this way as well, that just really think about legacy wealth and how to do a lot of creative ways to build accounts and IRAs, to ways to gift their children. We also have events on it's called Protect Wealth Academy. I encourage you to go to our website, take a look at that as well. But there's all kinds of tax strategies that small business owners are using, not just IRAs. That's why you want to look at things holistically and make sure that you're using the tools, because self-directed IRAs are so powerful, but you have to really understand what's prohibited, because there are things that are prohibited people, prohibited transactions. What are those? So it's through that education that you're going to learn what's the best tool for your individual strategy. But real estate investors have, especially as self-employed people, have a lot of different options. But Roth IRAs, especially this year, I mean, getting your kids started, if you can, you definitely want to look at that.
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you so much. I'm going to try to take over the screen and try to keep this to hopefully close to about an hour, just a little bit over an hour. So I'm going to stop your screen share.
Well, we have a comment here, Richard, who's a client, and he said for about 8 years, and he said, we're definitely amazing. So I really appreciate that. Thank you.
Awesome. Again, I know I just said the same thing too, but no, and everyone that we've worked with that came on with iPlan, they've been super happy. So again, if you have questions, concerns, problems, if you're looking to file paperwork, like, they're extremely responsive. Phone calls are returned the same day. If not, most of the time, somebody's there to answer the phone when you call. And I found that to be rare with most other companies. So I really, really appreciate it. And again, your fees have been super fair, super transparent, and it's been awesome.
Well, it's great to hear. And my contact information was there, but like I said, you can always get it from Jack, or go to iplangroup.com and reach out there as well. So thank you so much. I'll stay on and listen just in case we have any other questions.